Hello and welcome to this little video diary. This time about the game Red Faction and my impression of the game after completing the main campaign on the normal difficulty. So, what is the game about? Well, it's a first-person shooter based on Mars. You are playing as a miner during a mine revolution against the local authority. I thought that the concept of the story was quite interesting actually, but sadly it kind of lacks in the execution department, and it's kind of boring and it lacks any kind of remarkable or interesting characters or any kind of character development. So it's just an excuse for you being on Mars and shooting people. And hey, nothing wrong with that. And the environments in the game are fairly varied. There are quite cool low grav environment in the game that I enjoyed, but sadly, a lot of the environments on Mars are red tunnels and military facilities and so on, and they aren't all that exciting. Now, the combat in the game is kind of a mixed bag. It's very much functional, and overall, it's quite enjoyable. It's very much a shooter from its own time, with fluid movement and not the brightest enemies. But it's fun. Something that the combat really benefits from is that there are quite a lot of different weapons in the game. And there's also some cool ones like riot shields or a flamethrower or a gun with a removable silencer. Fuck yeah. You also get to fight underwater, which is always nice. Sadly, there aren't any sharks. But hey, you can't get everything. There are also some vehicle sections in the game, which is nice since it's much needed to split up the shooting sections. The vehicles didn't control all that well, but those sections were quite easy and short, so it didn't have any major impact on the gameplay. But I do believe that the shooting has some flaws that should be mentioned. The bosses in the game are, for starters, quite boring and dull, and some quite bullet spongy enemy types appear later on in the game, making some weapons totally useless. The grenades in the game are boring, slow, and useless, and sometimes the enemy spawns in weird places. The second part of the game is also combat area after combat area after combat area, and it gets a bit repetitive. And it doesn't help that a new weapon type is introduced, which the enemy can use to one-shot you. And if you combine that with a general lack of health packs, and also some explosive-based weapons that are hard to dodge without taking any damage, then what you get is a gameplay that really forces you to constantly save scum. I do not wish for it to seem like I have any problems with hard games, but if the game is hard for the wrong reason, then what happens is that you are forced to play the game in a very specific way. In this case, save scumming. Now, some people might disagree with me here, but in almost all video games, you can play in a certain way and abuse some system, like in these cases, quick save or regenerating health or bad AI to complete something very hard. And there's nothing wrong with that in itself, but if you are forced into a playstyle that isn't very fun, then hey, the playstyle isn't very fun and the game isn't very fun. But I do not want to sound too negative about the combat, and I had some fun with it, even though I think the second half of the game had some problems in it. But let's end this video by talking about something positive. And the stealth sections in this game was actually surprisingly enjoyable. Now, the stealth sections were mechanically extremely simple, but walking around with a silenced gun and being able to hide bodies and the like was just extremely satisfying for me. And sneaking around and shooting people in the back of the head while shouting "Viva la Revolution" was, it was nice. And it was a really nice change of pace from all the shooting. And I think that one of the reasons that I enjoyed the first part so much more than the second part of the game was because the second part didn't have any stealth sections to split it up. Now, the campaign took me around 7 hours to complete, and under that 7 hours I encountered one compatibility problem with my PC, and it was a door that wouldn't open. But I did find a workaround, so it was no big deal. And that was my impression of the game Red Faction. Thank you for watching, and all hail the revolution.